Hey guys, Paul from Paul's Karts here. Just wanted to bring another cylinder head. We got a big block Gx390 head. This is a 3834 Ferrea Titanium custom valves. Ferrea Titanium retainers, 6-degree keepers. These are actually 6mm stem valves. This is big block, but Gen3 ported, does have the bronze guides. Multi-angle valve job. Real nice valves actually. These Ferrea valves are really nice. Pop them out and show you guys the valve job and stuff. On the big blocks, you know, you can really move some air through them, so the porting is a little bit less finicky than the small blocks. The small block stuff is real touchy. You can have two ports that look the same, but if, you know, just as a little bit of shift in the porting or something like that, if the bias isn't correct, then you can have a big difference in flow numbers with the big blocks. As long as you have the basic port shape down and the proper bias, then you're pretty much good to go. Really with the big blocks, where the difference between a head that flows and a head that doesn't flow really comes in with the valve job. So the valve job on a big block, valve job on any engine, is one of the most important parts of the entire, you know, cylinder head build. Once you do the math for the bottom end and you determine what size valves you need and seats you're going to install, you know, once you get that ported out for that seat size and the CFM, that valve seat and the valve seat angles for any engine, the most important part of the entire engine is from 1/4 inch before to 1/4 inch after the valve seat, the intake valve seat in particular. That is the most important part of the entire engine. When it comes to making power, the biggest impediment to power is the intake valve. So if you can get that flow in and around that valve faster and quicker, especially in low lift, you're going to make big power that hangs on longer in the RPM range. So valve seats, valve seat angles, and the widths of the angles are very, very particular, especially in big block heads. Small block heads are just as important, but in big block heads, that's really make or break. So in these, we actually do I believe it's a 6-angle. Sometimes it's hard to see on camera. As you can see, we've fully radiused all this off. And this, if you run your finger over it, it feels like just a turn. It doesn't feel like there's any cuts on the seats or anything. If you've done the valve seats properly, you should actually come back in after you cut the seats and run a 3M Scotch-Brite over your seat and blend all the seat in, and then lap your valve in after that. I actually will cut the seats, blend the seats with some green 3M material or a cross buff on a mandrel, and then I'll come back in, I'll lap the valve, then I'll come back in with the cutter with real light pressure, give it one final clean pass, and then I'll come in with 2000 grit. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said 2000, that's way off. I'll come in with 400 grit and do the final lapping on the valves. These things checked out flawlessly. As you can see, we've actually took and blended this completely in. Everything has been completely blended on this. We did do the radius unshrouding. There's actually a specific measurement you want to hit with radius unshrouding if possible. You definitely want to have 200 thousandths of clearance in between the valve and the chamber wall. No more, no less. If there's less, it's going to be an impediment to flow. But in some situations where it's either put a bigger intake valve or keep your 200 thousandths clearance, you would rather have the bigger intake valve. Small blocks kind of run into that problem, when you get into the 32/28s on like a 212, you can't get to 200 thousandths, but that bigger intake valve in a 212 is still a benefit over running a 28.5 or something like that. But if you can get say in a small block, if you could get a 32/28 in there on like a 72 millimeter bore, and you're able to get that 200 thousandths, then that is going to fully unshroud the valve and allow for more flow, in which you'll be able to feed the valve to more percent of the valve instead of just feeding the valve through here. The rest of this valve will actually pick up the flow too, and that's how you gain the flow numbers. So, but in this big block here, we do have the bronze guides in. Guides have been reamed and honed. And everything has been transitioned in nicely. We do have the custom valves in this one. These are the titanium Ferrea 6 millimeter, so you have to put 6 millimeter guides in. We are running this with the Ferrea titanium retainers for the 6 millimeter valves and the Ferrea 6 millimeter locks. This is all custom valve train. So this head is Adams. It's completed, ready to go out. We used to cut these fins down, but now on the big blocks what we're doing is we're gonna leave the fins. We used to get a lot of chatter. If you cut just a little tip, if you guys are milling big block heads, if you mill this strip off and mill it all flat down, my cutter is big enough I could mill this much cylinder head. A lot of people's cutters, they don't have them that big, but you know, we've spent, you know, $1,000 on a cutter head, and we could cut, you know, 12 inches wide. This is about 6 inches wide. So if you, and to here is about 8. If you wanted to cut all of this to here, you can if you have a big enough cutter, but this is gonna vibrate and leave ripples in the cut. Just because the metal itself is going to get thin and it's going to flex, and it's not going to be rigid enough to maintain that cut. So in order to keep our cylinder heads truer, what we've done for the last few months or so is we've left this strip on thicker, and that actually stops the chatter from the cutter, and that would be a good tip for you guys. If you guys are milling big block heads, leave that on, because the gasket surface only comes to about here anyhow. So that's and you'll actually and you won't deal with any thin stuff where you get into real thin and the fin cracks. We've actually had them milled so much before that we've actually had to remove all of these fins off the heads before, and even cut this out where this little arm comes through in the back here. There's a little arm that comes straight up that supports this. If you mill it thin enough, you'll actually break through here, and this fin will get so thin you'll have to come in with a grinder and take it off clean. But we've actually took 159 thousandths off this head. We could have taken a little bit more, but if I go ahead and put these these valves back in, you got to be careful on big blocks, because what you do is you get into the point where this valve tip starts getting dangerously close to the gasket surface. If you run a straight edge across this, you only have a few thousand space, and the Ferrea valves have a great design. It has a thicker margin on the exhaust. You can see the margin relief cut, and it has a thicker margin. This is great in the titanium. The shape of this exhaust valve with the custom tulip is just amazing, and it flows incredible. But you just, if you look at that valve versus the intake valve, it's thicker. because you have a thinner margin on the intake valve. You want a thin margin with a sharp edge on the intake valve to cut the air. You want a thicker margin with a beveled edge on the exhaust because the air is going to be going the other way on that one. So the two valves have a different valve design and different margin thickness. Margin thickness, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is the thickness of the valve right here on this flat surface on the side. That's your margin thickness. So the thinner margin on the intake and the thicker margin on the exhaust. So with the thicker margin on the exhaust, you have to watch your clearances when you're milling your heads. A lot of the pistons, the billet pistons, have valve reliefs, which is great because some of those are like 200 thousandths deep. Stock as you buy them, right from the company, the ones we sell, are 200 thousandths deep valve reliefs, which is great in a big block. You definitely need that space to be able to run your big lifts. So just amazing cylinder head here. I love the titanium valves. A lot of guys have been going with those lately. I haven't been able to film every one. I've been trying to film a little bit more lately, just because we've been doing some incredible cylinder head builds, and you know, I just kind of want to document them for myself. I know the customers like to see them and stuff like that. I can't film everyone. I know a lot of you guys have been asking. I'm really sorry about that. You know, I'm slammed. Also, as a side note, guys, I'll probably make another video just for this, but on a personal matter, my mother has had a stroke, and it's real bad. It happened a little over a week ago, and that has been taking every third day. I have to go to the hospital and visit her. The hospital's about an hour away from my house. She's actually in a rehab now. She was in a hospital for a week. Entire left side of her body, she can't move it. Her arm, her leg, her face, she can't swallow. It's bad. So that's my number one concern, is making sure she has everything she needs, and being there to support her. We're definitely still working. We're still sticking to that one cylinder head a day, but just wanted to tell you guys what's going on, just in case you guys are wondering if maybe things might be a little bit slow. But I'm Paul. This is Paul's Karts. Thanks for the love. I appreciate it. Love these builds you guys are picking. And until next time, guys, have a nice day.